So this is what you see in The Biggest Loser. So if you look at the shaded area, that's your basal metabolism. That's not including exercise. The white bar on top is the exercise. So what you do is, in the show, of course, is they try and make up for it with insane amounts of exercise. So you can boost that up, but then as you go, your basal metabolic rate is still going down. And this is the problem, right? So they get off the show, they're not doing 8 hours a day of whatever it is they're doing, and that white bar goes back to sort of normal, and then that's it. They're not burning the calories, so even after they reduce their calories, their weight goes back up. So you see this when you look at The Biggest Loser, except for this guy who had the stomach surgery. Their basal metabolic, their weight goes all back up. You know, some people 50 pounds more than they did at the beginning, but it's because their basal metabolic rate is slowing so much. And this is the whole problem, is that we assume that energy out stays stable, right? So it's a two-compartment problem. That's the whole thing. So if you have a factory, for example, energy-producing, coal-burning factory, you have energy in, which is the coal, and then when it goes in, your body actually has two ways to use it. You can either burn it for energy, or you can store it as fat, right? So the energy comes in, say the coal comes in, you can either burn it or you can store it. When you eat calories, you have the same option. You can burn it or you can store it as body fat, right? So if you reduce the amount of energy in, so say you reduce the amount of coal that comes in, what we hope is that you keep burning the same amount of energy, and then the fat stores will come down, right? That would be fantastic. So if you're the manager of a coal-burning factory, for example, you get a little less coal, you still burn the same, and then you just decrease the amount of stores. Well, that would be good, except that's not what happens. What actually happens is that the fat stores stay the same, your energy goes down, your energy out goes down, and that's the problem. So the whole fallacy of calories in, calories out is that that stays stable. But it doesn't. We've known that for 100 years. We have all the studies to prove that it doesn't work. And the problem is not what you're putting in. The problem is this control right here. This is the main problem, not this. So everybody points to this, but you actually have to control this. Because if this comes in and it goes out as energy, it's okay. But if this comes in and goes over to fat stores, then you're not okay. So you're really talking about the hormonal control of energy partitioning. And that's the whole problem. How do you control it? How do you control those hormones? The second big problem is hunger. So what we see is that if you lose weight, then you get more hungry. So this is, again, published in the New England Journal of Medicine. They took people, they lost weight, and then they measured something called ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. And that's here. So black is baseline. And then at week 10, week 62, what you find is that as you lose weight, so you lose weight, but the weight slowly comes back on. But at all points, again, you can see that the ghrelin level is higher. In other words, you stay hungry with weight loss. So you see this in terms of, it will translate, the ghrelin, which is the hormonal mediator, is going to translate into higher levels of hunger. So this is the big problem. So you know that if you lose weight and you don't control those sort of things, then you're going to not be able to control the hunger and you're going to eat. And again, this is not just a lack of willpower. This is real physiology here. It's like if we did that to any one of you, you would be hungrier and you would eat because that's the physiology. But we don't do that, right? We blame people and we say, oh, you couldn't stop yourself from eating. It's like, yeah, because their ghrelin is higher. You never controlled the hormonal mediators. And that's the real issue of the body set weight, which is that the adaptation to weight loss is to reduce your energy expenditure and increase your hunger. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move past this a little bit. So one of the problems is this, right? So you have to actually control insulin, which is going to be the hormonal mediator of where this energy is going to go. If you don't control it, then you're going to lose. So if you cut 500 calories per day by cutting the fat off your meat, for example, that dietary fat has almost no insulin effect. It has 500 calories, but no insulin effect. your insulin's just as high. So if insulin's high, you're going to direct all that energy towards your fat stores. And that's where you're going to lose. So how does fasting help this problem? Well, if you look at the metabolic changes of fasting, what you see is that the basal metabolic rate is maintained. So this is 4 days of fasting. What you can see is that the top is the weight. The weight is steadily coming down, but REE is the resting energy equivalent. And what you see is that at the end of 4 days of not eating, your basal metabolic rate is actually 10% higher than when you started. And the VO2, which is a measure of how much energy you're burning, is the same. And it's because there are other hormonal changes. That is, as insulin goes down, other hormones go up. So insulin is coming down, but then your counter-regulatory hormones goes up, including something called noradrenaline or norepinephrine, as well as your sympathetic tone and growth hormone. Those are the counter-regulatory hormones, and they go up. And that's how you maintain your basal metabolic rate. After 22 days of alternate daily fasting, for example, what you see is that the RMR, which is your resting metabolic rate, goes from 63 to 6,300, which is not significantly different. This study compared CR, which is calorie restriction, to alternate daily fasting. Again, you look at the adjusted resting metabolic rate. The box on the right shows you that the caloric restriction reduces your energy output by 76 calories a day. The fasting group only went down by 29, which with a p-value is 0.4, which means that's not statistically significant. So again, this is one of the big problems of weight loss, long-term weight loss, is this metabolic rate. And because the fasting improves the hormonal changes about the energy partitioning, it's not actually giving you the same problems, because your body is not just ratcheting down its energy expenditure. What it's done is it's switched over its fuel sources from food to body fat, because that's what body fat is for. It's for you to use when you have nothing to eat. It's not there for looks. It's for you to use. So use it. That's all you need to do. Don't do something silly like eat 6 times a day, cut your fat, and cut a few calories. The other problem is hunger. And this is again, ghrelin. We're looking at fasting and ghrelin. So they took people, they fasted for 24 hours, and then they measured their ghrelin at all time points. And this is one of the things I always hear, if you don't eat that muffin, you're going to be so hungry, you're going to stuff your face afterwards. So what actually happens when you don't eat for 24 hours? So those things on top, that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you see that ghrelin does spike. So you do get hungry at that time. But what happens when you don't eat lunch? So say you skip lunch. This is the first one, L. Does ghrelin just keep going up and up and up? No. In fact, when you get to 4 o'clock, your ghrelin has gone back down to baseline, because this line that's here is baseline. That is, you're about as hungry eating lunch as not eating lunch. And the same thing happens at dinner time. Your ghrelin goes up, yes, then you don't eat, and several hours, it just goes right back down to baseline. So the hunger doesn't build and build and build. It actually comes as a wave. If you ride out that wave, it'll just go back to baseline. And we've all done this, right? So you've been so busy, you worked right through lunch. I mean, you did this tons of times in medical school. You're too busy, you didn't eat dinner. Yeah, at 12 o'clock, you're hungry. At 1 o'clock, you're hungry. At 4 o'clock, it's as if nothing happened. It's as if you ate lunch. And you just kept working. And we know this happens because we've all done this before. And we know that it's just, yeah, you might eat a little bit more at dinner, but you're not like ravenously starving. And it's okay to not eat, because what's happened is that your body has taken that food energy from your body fat. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want it to do. The interesting part is when you go into the multiple day fast, what you see is that over 4 or 5 days, the ghrelin goes up and down, but over the ensuing days, it actually goes lower and lower and lower. And we see this with the people who are doing sort of 4 or 5 days of fasting at a time, that the hunger actually starts to disappear, because you're fueling your body through your body fat, so then you don't have that hunger anymore, and you're getting more efficient at using it. So therefore, it's a great strategy. Some people say, oh, well, women, it doesn't help. It turns out, if you look at ghrelin, women have a much bigger spike in ghrelin than men. And so if you look at food cravings and so on, women tend to feel it more. So they actually get more benefit, because some people say, oh, women should never fast. It's like, why? They get more benefit from that than anybody else. And the weight loss is the same. If you look at food cravings, for example, you can compare a low-calorie diet to a very low-calorie diet. So it's interesting because you can take any of these cravings, sweets or high fat or whatever, you put them on a 1,300 calorie a day diet. Those cravings don't do anything. So this is the measure of the cravings, and this is how much they have cravings. The low-calorie diet does nothing. But if you eat practically nothing at all, the cravings just disappear. Because the cravings are like an itch. So any parent knows that if your child is really itchy, the last thing you really want to do is scratch it, because it's going to get more itchy. And cravings are the same. So by going into these intermittent fasting where you're really allowing nothing at all, that's going to make more benefit for your cravings than the other. And controlling hunger is the big issue. It's not about controlling calories. I mean, that's like grade school stuff, right? You have to control the metabolic rate, and you have to control your hunger signaling. That's what's important. And what's really interesting is that if you go to very low-calorie diets, as you start to refeed, what you can see is that the cravings don't go back. So they start up out here, but even after 6 weeks of refeeding, the cravings have gone away. So you're sort of reprogramming your body for that. So this is the, again, the changes. So when you compare CR, which is calorie restriction, to alternate daily fasting, if you look at the box, what you can see is that the ghrelin is significantly different. If you look at calorie restriction, this one, the ghrelin goes up by 71. So you're more hungry after doing this calorie restriction. The alternate daily fasting is only up by, I think it's 16, but the p-value is 0.5, which means it's not significantly different. Again, the calorie restriction, daily calorie restriction, causing more hunger, the alternate daily fasting causing less hunger. And that's a huge, huge, huge part. So if you look at long-term weight loss, what you see is that chronic calorie restriction, cutting the fat, cutting your calories, eating 6 times a day, so you're keeping your insulin high but dropping your calories, what you get is increase in hunger and a decrease in metabolism. And this is what happens. Your weight plateaus, your weight starts to regain, and you're like, oh, don't even look at me, right? As you face that sort of, you know, all that judgmental people who are like, oh yeah, you shouldn't have regained that weight. It wasn't their fault, because we know that. This is all physiology. As opposed to fasting, where your hunger decreases, your metabolic rate stays stable or goes up, and you're like, yeah, let's go. So that's the whole problem. Why don't we actually do this for people, right? It's because there's so many myths with intermittent fasting. People say, well, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this. You're going to burn muscle, right? That's one of the more common things I hear. If you don't eat, you're going to burn muscle. And it's actually not true. If you look at studies, for example, this study, where they compared fasting, so it's 70 days of alternate daily fasting, you can see that the fat mass has gone down from 43.5 to 38.1. And the fat-free mass, or your lean mass, went from 51.4 to 51.9. So in fact, your lean muscle is being maintained. Because again, remember, what you're doing is you're dropping insulin and raising growth hormone so that when you eat, you're going to rebuild that protein. So you're maintaining that lean mass. If you look at this study, again, from 2016, if you compare the two groups, calorie restriction versus alternate daily fasting, what you see is that the truncal fat mass is much better with the alternate daily fasting, so 1.8% versus 0.3%. And this is the really dangerous stuff, right? The fat that's carried around your belly. So that is like 6 times better. But if you look at lean mass, so calorie restriction is up by 0.5% because you've lost some fat, but alternate daily fasting is up by 2.2%. In other words, it's like 4 times better at maintaining lean mass. So this whole idea, oh, you're going to burn muscle, is just a myth. And if you think about it, again, do you think that our body is designed so stupidly that we store food energy as body fat, and when we need it, we're going to burn protein? It's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, you got to think that Mother Nature is so stupid. We think we're so smart, and humans are so smart, and Mother Nature is so stupid. You know, we've been here for millions of years. You store body fat so that you can use it when there's nothing to eat. You're not going to burn your protein. It's like, you know, storing all this firewood, and then the minute you need something for your wood-burning stove, you chop up your sofa and throw it in the fire. Like, honestly, do you think that's the human body? Like, the human body is not that stupid. And the other thing that people say, oh, yeah, you can't do it, right? Yeah, it's a great idea, but nobody's going to do it, right? It's like nobody, like all the Buddhists that don't do it, like all the Muslims who don't do it, all the Catholics who don't do it, all the Jews who don't do it. I mean, literally, billions of people around the world follow this because of religion, because of spirituality, for whatever reason they do it. Billions of people have been doing this for thousands of years, like at least since the time of like zero or you know, Jesus, when he said, oh yeah, you should fast, like during Lent and so on. Like, it's thousands of years we're talking of human history that people have done it, and oh, since 1970, it's a really bad idea because modern man is so smart. And yet we get this obesity epidemic, this type 2 diabetes epidemic, and we still tell people, you should never fast ever. It's like, that's ridiculous. So it doesn't work is another refrain. It's like, well, if you don't eat, you'll probably lose weight. And I put this in because some people say, oh, women, it doesn't work in. It's like, well, it does, because when you put them on fast, women lose weight at the same rate as men. If you don't eat, you're going to lose weight. And the thing about fasting is that we're talking about something, we're dealing with something completely different than diet, okay? So diet is something that tells you, should I eat this or should I eat this, right? Fasting doesn't talk about that at all. Fasting is dealing with everything outside the period that you're eating. So it has nothing to do with diet. You could eat a high-fat diet or you could eat a vegetarian diet. That has nothing to do with fasting. Fasting is really dealing with a completely separate question of when you should eat. That is, you should eat within a certain time or whether you should or shouldn't eat. It's a completely different question, and therefore it's much more powerful because you can add it to sort of any diet. And that's really a lot of the advantages. So it's flexible, for example. You could do it this week and not do it next week. It's convenient because if you don't eat, you don't have to shop, you don't have to cook, you don't have to eat, and you don't have to clean up. And it's like, honestly, that's the reason I don't eat breakfast, because I wake up at 7, I want to be out by 7:15. So if I want to shower, I'm not going to eat. And it's so much easier. And my son does this, and all the teenagers do this because they wake up. So I wake up 20 minutes before I get out. My son wakes up 2 minutes before he gets out the door, right? So it's convenient for people because you don't have to do it. And this is one of the things. We all have busy lives. So we all say, oh, you know, you should eat a home-cooked meal every single time. It's like, that's a great idea, but it takes a lot of time. This is not that. This is going to actually give you back time. So when I get busy, I tend to do more because I have work to do. It's free. So this is a huge advantage. Like, if you deal with disadvantaged peoples, if you're dealing with native peoples, people who just don't have the resources to buy pasture-fed, organic produce. It's like, that's great stuff, but it's expensive. Like, these people are not shopping at Whole Foods. They got a budget. And this is going to give them back money. It's not just free. It actually gives you back money because you don't have to buy all this stuff. And it's simple. So again, you can take these diets like ketogenic diets, for example, and you can say, well, you know, they're great. But they're complicated. So I deal with the 65, 70-year-old Filipino lady who doesn't speak much English. And, you know, she's been eating this way, her way, for 65, 70 years. It's very hard to change her, but it's a lot easier to say, well, these meals don't eat, and just treat it like a medical therapeutic intervention. You're going to let your body burn off the sugar, then you're not going to need your insulin. And they understand that, and the simpler it is, the easier it is. And that's the whole point. You can add this to any diet because it's not about the diet. It's about a completely separate question. So whether it's meat or wheat or nuts, or you don't have time, you don't have money, you're traveling all the time, you don't cook, all of this stuff, you can still use the fasting. And one of the things that always appeals to the sort of doctors is that it gives you sort of this unlimited power. Because the reason why people like it is because if you have a drug, for example, like insulin, you can give it, and certain drugs have a maximum dose. So you give metformin, and there's a maximum dose. People like insulin because you can just keep ramping the dose. Well, fasting is the same. Like if you take a diet, like a vegetarian diet, and you don't do well, well, you can't get any more vegetarian to get better results, right? It doesn't work that way. Or if you're doing a ketogenic diet, it's like you can't get more ketogenic, because if that didn't work for you, it didn't work for you. That's the bottom line. But with the fasting, it's almost inconceivable that you can not lose weight, because if you don't eat, you have to lose weight. So nobody doubts that. It's just the reason people tell you not to do it is because they say it's so unhealthy for you. But it's actually the opposite is true. And again, we get back to this idea that, what's so, disconcerting about the whole thing is that these sort of ideas are not new. They're actually the oldest ideas that ever came about. Like, I didn't make this stuff up. It came from Jesus Christ. It came from the Prophet Muhammad. It came from Buddha, the three most influential people in the history of the world. Like, they only probably agreed on that one thing. So we've practiced this throughout humanity, throughout human history, and yet, as we get into the 21st century, we think that our old selves are so stupid that it's not going to help you. So, these are like the oldest ideas in the book, and they're so powerful, and there's so much physiology behind it. We've studied this for hundreds of years, and why can't we do it, right? And the answer always comes back to there's no money in it. There's no money in it. Like, that's it. And this is why these sort of things are so important, to get these ideas out there, because the point is not to make money. I don't make money. If you fast and do well, I don't make any money. But I get paid in a different way, right? Same as Bill. We get paid in a different way, which is that we understand that we're actually able to help move the needle for human health, and we're allowing people to take control of their own health. Because if you have obesity, if you have type 2 diabetes, you no longer have to say, oh, well, I have to go see my doctor to see what pill I need. I need to go see my doctor to see if he needs to stick a stent in me. No, we're giving you the power to take back your own health, because you're not going to get it from anywhere else. Thank you.